What's up, world, and welcome back to the Global Frequency. I am Nefarious.
And I'm Frequency Girl.
And today we are joined by Ethan Pettus, here to tell us all about his comic book crowdfunding campaign for Primitive War issue number 1, now available on Indiegogo. Ethan, how's it going?
Nice to meet you all.
Nice to meet you too, man. So before we get into the book, we usually ask our guests a series, background questions and get to know them a little bit better. You've been working on this project since 2018, and it's the adaptation of a novel that you wrote, actually a series of novels. Where are you from? When did you decide you wanted to be a writer?
So I'm from Kentucky, and I've spent most of my life in Kentucky. I actually came up with the idea for Primitive War when I was 16 years old, still in high school. I happened to be taking the ACT, which is what we take for, kind of like SAT for pre-college prep. And I happened to be reading a lot about Vietnam at that time, especially stuff by people like Tim O'Brien and PJ Caputo, who actually served over there. And it got to me in a way that no other form of literature ever had, because these are people that experienced real things that most people never have any kind of comprehension of. And I went to college for a year, and the entire time I was there, nothing spoke to me as much as writing did, because I've been writing since I was a kid. Started by writing short stories about monsters and whatnot, and after a year of college, I just decided to take the plunge and start working on the first Primitive War novel. It took me 4 years to get it from first draft to an actual published book, but I self-published it. So if I had continue pursuing traditional publishing means, it would have taken a lot longer.
Yeah, I mean, self-publishing is a huge accomplishment in and of itself. Taking on the, immense task of first off writing it, then editing it, getting pre-pressed together, finding the printer, putting it out there into the world, and circulating it through the right channels so that you can start making people aware of it and getting sales and getting reviews and establishing yourself. Man, that's you got to be your own press agent. You got to do everything by yourself, and that can be really daunting.
Mo says Kentucky. I wonder if this dude knows Colonel Crack, or if those birds know Pedro's cricket.
It's entirely possible. I
I'm
think
just curious.
Yep.
Who is Colonel Crack?
Colonel Crack is our friend Jeremy Thevenot, and he is a great artist, really wonderful guy, working on a series called Beckoned right now. First it was a video game, then he started making the comic out of it. And we got a bunch of people up in the chat who are familiar with indie comics or into the indie comic scene. We got D-Wag saying hey, was he first?
Technically General Piggy was first. I pinned it, but it's not showing up in StreamYard.
Piggy's actually your number one backer. Yeah, he was first to back the Primitive War campaign that you got on Indiegogo right now.
And
wow, thank you.
Was backer number 215.
Nice.
Appreciate you.
We also got Alejandro VS from Inkfinity Comics. Thanks so much for tuning in, Ale. We've got
there, so he's staying up.
Rick Sailor. Hello.
Hey,
and
cheers.
We've got
we have B Rose.
Scrolling down. Yep, we got B
Black
Rose.
Rose Comics.
We got Ollie from 656. What's up, Oliver? Thank you so much for tuning in, dude.
And I have to yell his name. It's like he pays me.
We got Dean James from Comics Mate.
Hey, Dean.
Australia.
Really. Yeah, he's from Australia. Yep, he is indeed. He's an artist on the Embrace right now, and he's working on his own project.
And getting ready to start Embrace number 2.
I too have written some novellas that I plan to turn into comics. I bet that was very challenging and time consuming. So yeah, tell us about the process. First off, you're working with Babasu, right? How did the two of you meet, connect, and how did you entice him to work on the project?
So the first time I had seen Babasu's artwork, it was in a dinosaur group on Facebook, and it was feathered Tyrannosaurus Rex, and the T-Rexes in Primitive War are feathered. I know that's not the current science, but at the time that was like a well-accepted theory.
Yeah, I remember that. Yep. Back in like 2016, 2017, scientists were like, dinosaurs had feathers.
Yeah, there's still a lot of species that are believed to have feathers, but T-Rex isn't one of them. But by the time that I had actually published Primitive War, the science had already changed, like within a year before that, and I had already gone too far along to want to change the appearance of the Tyrannosaurs. So it stayed the same. But anyway, Babasu, when I saw that feathered Tyrannosaurus that he made, I reached out to him and talked about collaborating. And at first he said no because he was so busy. But then he happened to listen to an interview I did for another podcast called Prehistory, Prehistory, a Time Traveler's Guide. And he liked the concept behind the story as I was explaining it to this interviewer. And he reached out and he was like, hey, I changed my mind. I think I want to collaborate. And so first he started with like preliminary sketches of all the dinosaurs. And since then, we've been working nonstop on this. We started by working on a pitch issue, basically summarizing the entire first novel. And we sent that to a lot of different publishers, but never got further than just getting looked at by editors. And that's when we decided to just do it on our own.
Right on. So for those of you who don't know, Babasu is from Greece, went to like a fine art school in Athens, and is currently working at Zenescope. You probably, if you know Zenescope Comics, are familiar with the series Robin Hood, which is probably where he's best known from. That's where his work is featured. But like you said, he does do a lot of other art. There's a lot of stuff on his art station, and I think it's pretty neat that like you found him in a Facebook group for dinosaurs. I didn't know that there. I mean, I'm sure. I should be aware that there are Facebook groups for dinosaurs, a Facebook group for everything, right?
Oh, there's so many.
We got Rich joining us. Thank you so much, Rich, for tuning in. And we got Armin.
Hey, Armin.
Submarine Treehouse. I keep wanting to call him Submarine Banana. I don't know why.
Not his name.
So
Mo says this could be bigger than Billy and the Clonosaurus.
I love Simpsons so much.
See, Mo makes these references that like they're just over my head sometimes.
But Mo knows all.
And he interfaces with the guest well.
Alex says, did you guys see that Apple TV is going to release this really cool documentary that people consider to be the spiritual sequel to Walking with Dinosaurs? I did not.
No, I did not.
Yeah, he also wants to know if he can have a wrench. Ale, so the rule on this channel is Mo Biggs is in charge. So if
Mo Biggs says wrench, then we give wrench.
Then we give wrench. If Mo Biggs does not say wrench, then no wrench.
So far, Primitive War consists of 2 books and a bestiary and an anthology called Primitive War Dispatches. It even has its own fandom wiki, which breaks down all of the information from the series. It's got, all the ins and outs of everything that happens. So it's got a pretty big fan base. Why turn it into a comic book series?
So I've been reading comics since I was a little kid. I started off with basic comic strips like Bloom County, Opus and Garfield.
I love Opus. The cat is the best.
So that was my first introduction to the comic medium, and then moving on to like Mad Magazine as a middle schooler, and then finally on to like Batman comics. The first full comic I read was the Joker by Brian Azzarello. And so I've always had this love for comics and comic storytelling, and it plays a big role in what I write because I have a very visual mind. And so everything that I write basically sets up what could be a comic. And I always had the idea for very extended lore and a widespreading universe to tell these stories in. And I think it's perfect for the comic book medium. But adapting the first novel alone as an ongoing series to fully explore all the subject matter in the story could take up to 30 to 40 issues, which, it's a pretty decently long run. But we want to start from the ground up so that way we have complete creative control over what we actually make.
I've heard a lot of people, actually, a friend of mine, Arrogant Ape, specifically was talking about how this reminds him of the Dark Horse Aliens series. Did you ever read that? It has a similar feel to what you're putting out now with the comic adaptation. Have you ever thought of expanding Primitive War using the comic books as sort of a storyboard for a pitch to make it like a movie or a TV show, something like that? I could see this being produced on something like the Sci-Fi Channel really easily. This could definitely get adapted, like simple, very, very simply. Did you ever consider that?
Yeah, and I already sold the film rights to the first Primitive War novel, and that's going to be directed by Luke Spark, who created the Occupation films. You can see them on Netflix. They were released in Australia, and this will be his first project working in the American market.
Neat.
So
we have to look that up.
Yeah.
Someone grab a link and drop it for me. We got Hockey. Good day, sir. Thank you so much for tuning in. So
we also had 24 Eyes sneak in.
Yeah, he's driving.
Yeah,
he is driving. When you started adapting the novel into comic book format, how difficult was that? I know writing a comic book and writing a novel, two different things. Writing a comic book is closer to writing a screenplay, but still you have to be aware of how you design your pages, how you position your panels. Did you write with that in mind, or did you mostly like break it down into the story beats and then hand it over to Babasu and hope he took it from there?
So, like I said, I've always loved comics, so this was my first opportunity to actually make a comic, and so I took it page by page, panel by panel.
Good.
Trying to focus directly on the visual eye, because when you're reading a novel, you're not going off of pictures. You're kind of composing the imagery inside your own mind. And I have to be very conscientious of that when I write books. So I just applied the same thing with the comic writing, in the sense that rather than trying to fill in the gaps for people to use their imaginations, I had to tell them exactly what I was seeing in my mind. And honestly, I don't think it was that difficult, but it's something that I put a lot of thought into, because I still read comics like every day. Transmetropolitan, I have the entire series and have read it all
Nice.
3 times.
Good.
Preacher multiple times.
Preacher's another one. Yep.
I finally have every Hellblazer trade paperback, and I've read them all more than once. Batman, all of Grant Morrison's run, all of Scott Snyder's run, and so much more. It's every time I read a comic, I try to imagine what the script writing process was for that comic, and it's played a big role in how I actually write the scripts for the comic. But Babasu has read the Primitive War novel multiple times, and he's listened to the audiobook multiple times. So for him, it's really easy to kind of link up with exactly what is in my mind's eye. It's like we're on the same page.
That's awesome that he's like it's almost like he's a fan of yours too, right? Like if he's read the book several times and listened to the audiobook, I mean he must be really like digging what you put out in your novels. Have you read any of Babasu's comics per se? Like are you aware of his work outside of Primitive War?
So he's worked on his own creator-owned comic that he wrote and illustrated called Heracles. It's because he's from Greece and he has this deep love of Greek mythology. He tried to tell uh, his own take on the Heracles story, Hercules, as closely to uh, reality as possible. So I've read his work on that, but to be honest, I haven't read any of Robin Hood, so that's my own fault.
But no, I mean, like, that's just the series that people are probably going to know him from. That's like the most long running stuff that he's put out there. He's been on it for like 4 or 5 years at this point. But any of the stuff that you're familiar with, as long as you know the work, like not a lot of people read, you mentioned Transmetro. Not a lot of people read Warren Ellis's book, Crooked Little Vein. Great book. It's Warren Ellis, the novelist, not Warren Ellis, the comic book creator or comic book writer. So it's just like where you know the work from, which, and I think is really neat that you're like, the independent stuff. And that's great because when you're creating your own title, when you're doing your own thing, which it sounds like is exactly what you did with Primitive War, that's what you really want to be seeing people do. So what can they do when they're left to their own devices? So did you two thumbnail together? How did the art process work?
So the way it worked is I would start by writing the entire script and I would send it to Babasu, and he would work on his own pencil layouts, just really brief thumbnails, and he would send them all to me as he completed them. And I would give him feedback based on what I was visualizing. And sometimes we have a back and forth where it's like, well, we could take this page and break up the panels this way, or maybe we could do it this way. And we discuss that between each other and come to some sort of resolution that matches what both of us are seeing. So once we get that underway, then he moves on to full pencils, then inks, then we send it to Maja for coloring.
So it seems like you really are involved in the direct hands-on creation of every page. And I really like that because a lot of times comic book writers, they'll write their script, they'll send it off to the artist, they'll kind of just let the artist interpret the script and apply it to the page. Then the artist might send the roughs over to the writer, and the writer will be like, oh yeah, that's good, and send them back for inks and then colors. But I like when people who are creating those books get involved to the point where they're learning to apply the fundamentals of comic book scripting and conceiving of the work visually on the page. And it seems like, like you were saying earlier, these things come to life in your mind. You visualize these things when you're reading a novel, and you're really trying to help give a guided view to the reader of what you want to show them. So, I just think that that's really neat that you get involved to that degree. So on that same sort of topic, being that involved, how much research did you do in preparation for this novel? They say write what you know. How much did you research, like archaeology and history?
Well, I did a lot of research on the paleontology because I think Michael Crichton, the creator of Jurassic Park, he set a benchmark with his first, his 2 Jurassic Park novels, Jurassic Park and the Lost World. And what I wanted to do is kind of carry that torch along in publishing a book with dinosaurs that weren't just, big leathery monsters. I wanted to write something that was more true to life, even though I do take liberties with what paleontology can't tell us directly. But that's been the ethos, is to continue with the as accurate as possible, despite the inaccuracies that come from creative liberties. As far as the Vietnam War, I mean, I've been reading about Vietnam and the conflicts in Vietnam since, I was in high school, since I was old enough to kind of take that subject matter and analyze it. And as I've gotten older and worked on other projects related to primitive war, I've kind of expanded beyond just the Vietnam War into the Cold War in general and the politics of the Cold War. And that's why the sequel takes place in Africa, because in Angola, the conflict there was kind of like its own Vietnam War in the African theater. But because America wasn't directly involved, it doesn't really get that much attention in in American education.
Yeah, in the history books that we have. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and
The
if you
same way
don't
that we
study
don't-
history, you're doomed to repeat it.
Yep, exactly. It's the same reason that we don't have a whole lot of information in our education system about South Africa, and like Joburg and places like that, or Rio de Janeiro and the histories therein, which lead to the types of problems and economic depreciation that have caused rifts in society. And you're right. Like if you don't look outside of the educational bubble that you're given, you don't really get an eye for what's happening in the world and world events and how they impact each other. What?
Raiden Radio says Korean War gets hugely overlooked.
That's absolutely true.
I don't remember really learning about the Korean War. Vietnam War, we went into like a lot in high school. My social studies teacher was really awesome. They like set up the whole classroom and like they spent a whole month where like they did like.
Did you go into like the Rolling Stone version of Vietnam, or did you go into like the military doctrine?
So it was more like, it wasn't just the Vietnam War. It was kind of like the era.
So you were studying the 60s and
it was told through the lens of the cultural impact as well, and not so much the like military action.
I mean, that's tough to learn in high school, right? It's tough for them to start teaching you about like the actual wartime propaganda that was being fed to people and the clandestine events that were going on overseas.
They did talk about like propaganda and stuff like that and the cultural influence of it, but the influence on the culture.
Talk about Agent Orange.
No, my drama teacher told me.
Yeah, okay. So, one of the things that I've seen said about the book, about the novel, is that you really pick uncommon or unique selections of dinosaur, and you really devote time to fleshing out their description and their behavior, and that really does make it feel exciting or at least authentic and terrifying. A lot of people talk about how frightening the book can actually be. Mo says the psychological damage done during the Korean War is what led to the Korean manga format. I hope that's not true. I mean, that'll be with us forever. I saw a funny meme today. It was samurai. It was a brief history of Japan. It was a picture of a samurai, then the A-bomb, and now like Harajuku girls doing the ahego face and stuff like that. It's really weird. I don't know. It just flew into my head.
Your head is a strange place. Raiden Video says points for using the word clandestine.
So when you were deciding which dinosaurs, why did you gravitate towards the ones that you did? Why not like pick Velociraptor instead of like Utah or Utahraptor? I don't even know how to say it. Why not pterodactyl and the ones we know?
Mo says Agent Orange is my favorite retired otter pop, and Mo wants to know. Not Mo. Dean says the only important question in the 60s: would you have been a hippie or a narc?
Well, for those of you that don't know, Ethan plays the didgeridoo and is a self-described beatnik, so I think he'd probably be a hippie.
Yeah.
I probably would have been swept up by the propaganda and gone to war, and then immediately regretted it. Yeah.
Got shot in the ass, come home, started a fishing boat, shrimping company or something.
Yeah, shrimp company. Yeah, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. Yeah. That would have gotten to me really quickly.
Yep. Yeah, unfortunately, we don't quite have that same mentality these days, or at least you don't see that as the common sentiment amongst popular culture. It's a lot more fractured. But anyway, dinosaurs. Why did you pick the ones that you picked?
It's just personal taste. There's a similar species that kind of fills in the role of what a Velociraptor's role would be, which is Deinonychus. which was originally the inspiration for the Velociraptors in Jurassic Park. But, they had to blow them up in size, which kind of what Utah Raptor fills the role of, is the large Dromaeosaurid threat. And other species like Tyrannosaurus Rex is a very basic option because everybody loves T-Rex. Triceratops, everybody loves Triceratops. But other species like Quetzalcoatlus and Caprasuchus, those were kind of underutilized in what you call paleomedia. So I wanted to make the most of them and, use them in a compelling way that hadn't been seen before in fiction, at least to my knowledge.
So let's talk about the book then, like the comic book. Obviously, the story is set in Vietnam. How faithful is the depiction of that Vietnam to our real world Vietnam? I know you said you studied it a lot. So how deep into the representations of what actually happened there are you trying to go?
So I didn't want to tell a basic military action story where you have very defined, company and battalion movements. So I didn't want to tell a story that's just, a war against dinosaurs. I wanted to focus on the psychological aspects of war. And so that's where most of my, attention was dedicated towards, was the characters and how their experiences with war changed them, and the damage that it may wrought on psyches of soldiers. So most of the accuracy is dedicated to, the atrocities of war, more so than just, military coded language.
Right. And from issue 1, because I read issue 1, there are a couple scenes that feel like, difficult to, get through, but that's just like the atrocities of man. There's a section where you talk about how war isn't about ideology. That's like a front or a cover, how it's about our animalistic impulse to be driven to kill. So like, as far as the subtextual elements here in this book, it seems that you're juxtaposing something like ideology with animal instinct. What other subtextual elements are you looking at in this setting?
So one of my biggest influences is, in this story, Dante's Inferno. The journey that the characters go on is kind of a allegory for, the death and suffering that people go through spiritually, mentally. And you see that through the main character group. You see that essentially through all characters in the story. You see how their connection to conflict slowly wears them down and breaks some of them, whereas others, work through what that suffering imposes upon them to become better people, at least for the people that they're fighting alongside. Because I know you mentioned that that Major, the character Wallace, and his entire monologue in issue 1 is his own perspective on what conflict is, not my personal perspective. So that's why the imagery in that issue, immediately following his monologue, it plays off of what he describes, what he views the purpose of war and conflict as. But that's just getting to the base matter. It's not delving fully from his perspective into what those ideologies are for and how they inspire war and conflict. That's something that I want to explore further in books that I'm working on now.
Yeah, it seems like you do a lot with killers, like dinosaurs are killers, and in the book, humans kill too. But then you do the same thing with monsters. Humans can act monstrous, but the dinosaurs are monsters. The dinosaurs are motivated by pure instinct to kill. They don't have this more sinister side, or doing, violence out of cruelty. So it's this interesting double line where you're juxtaposing the monstrousness and killarness of people with that of the dinosaurs, and how they're kind of inverted. And I really like the idea of setting that up in issue 1. It comes across very clearly. But also that in this story, the war between people, between the communists and the Americans, is a war for supremacy. Whereas in the jungle, between the soldiers and the dinosaurs, it's a war for survival. What?
No, I said, Neff, stop talking over the birds. Have some manners.
Sorry, I'll lower my voice.
I just have to say, because of dinosaurs and their relation to birds, I thought it'd be more appropriate to, put myself amongst modern dinosaurs.
That's fair, man.
The chat likes it. It's
Noah wants me to get a tree and some birds now.
Shadowpunk says, Ethan is deep. I'm digging it.
Hey, what's up, Shadowpunk? Thanks for tuning in, hanging out with us today. So,
war never changes. Cuts to a pterodactyl dropping a nuke.
We're talking about, this backdrop. This there are some textual themes that you're playing with. You are setting it in a real world setting with a historical backdrop, right? Where does the science fiction come in? What brought the dinosaurs to the jungle? Like in Jurassic Park, it was genetic experiments. Can you reveal to us the origin of your prehistoric interlopers?
Or is that a spoiler?
I mean, I'm just asking. You can say no.
We show it in the pitch issue, which you can find online. And we're also offering a printed version of the pitch issue in our Indiegogo campaign. But essentially, the dinosaurs come from experimentation with particle collider technology, kind of like the Large Hadron Collider.
Yep.
And it's taking the understood science of the Large Hadron Collider and taking it to the 10th degree of sci-fi jiggery pokery, as one British reviewer said, where it's meant to kind of mirror what the nuclear arms race was at the time, where you have characters that are trying to justify the development of these particle colliders for the production of antimatter, in the sense of using it as a catalyst for energy technology, when in reality it's just weaponization, as nuclear technology is ultimately utilized for in almost every country that it's procured in. Not saying anything against nuclear energy, but the unfortunate truth is that anybody can give you any reason for the technology they create, but ultimately any technology in the hands of humans can be used as a weapon, unfortunately.
Yeah, I gotta say, I was very interested in that, and since I haven't read the novels, I went and found the wiki, and I just read the wiki, which kind of spoils the series a little bit, but all the information's already out there on the internet. And I was very interested in how the collider kind of offered the promise of unlimited energy or total destruction, and then somewhere in the middle, a portal to prehistory that brought dinosaurs, which I thought was like, all right, that's a new take on it. I haven't thought of that before.
I would just like to say that I did call it.
I was looking at like the barrels of the palladium tea, and I'm like, I wonder if there's some sort of strange, mutation idea in there. I wonder how we're going to get it. And Freq Girl's like, nope, it's totally the particle accelerator. It opens wormholes and dinos come through. And I'm like, are you really? And she's like, yeah, that's how this works. All right.
And then he read the wiki.
And then I read the wiki, and I was like, you're absolutely right. I did not expect that. I probably should have expected that, but I didn't expect that.
Hadron Collider.
So who are the protagonists in this? Because it doesn't really seem like anyone's off the bat the good guy. You see the Americans, they're kind of horrible. You meet the Vietnamese team. I think that's the Vietnamese team in the jungle, and the guy who's leading them, he seems horrible. And then you meet the communist leader, and he's pretty horrible. I'm kind of rooting for the dinosaurs. You know what I mean? I'm kind of like, at least I understand your motivations, man.
Well, AA says all of my favorite people are dinosaurs.
Yeah, right.
So I feel like you bond with them.
So who are the protagonists? Who do you intend us to really, get behind and root for?
So those characters that appear in issue 1, they appear throughout the rest of the comic, but the primary protagonists appear in the second issue, which we're currently working on. The main character team is called Vulture Squad, and they're a special forces group that is specifically assigned to rescuing POWs and missing soldiers. And
well, we know they don't find those guys though, because it says it clear as day in issue 1. I'm like, he would never be found. I was like, oh, well, that sucks. That dude's fucked.
I wonder what new adventures.
Yeah, so that's out of the way. Obviously, Vulture Squad's going to find something else in the jungle, but yeah, I mean that is the main squad, I guess.
Yeah,
you do see the background characters.
Yeah, the misdirection of that plays into orders from higher ups in the military, because when it comes to clandestine operations, the soldiers involved aren't always going to be told the absolute truth. They're going to be told exactly what's necessary for them to operate. But when it comes to Vulture Squad,
that's true for the soldiers in Vietnam and for future war sci-fi mech pilots. They're only ever told exactly what they need to know to do what higher ups want them to.
It's true.
Key phrase that I would use to describe Vulture Squad's predicament is canaries in a coal mine. They're being used.
You the canaries.
Yeah, they're being used. Yep.
I know that wasn't really a canary. I was just being funny.
You're very funny.
Yeah.
So if Vulture Squad's kind of the protagonists here, who are the antagonists?
So the antagonists, the Russian forces that are present in Vietnam during this time serve as an antagonistic force against the protagonists. But ultimately, the greatest threat to the characters are their own traumatic experiences and the way that those things change them as people. That's the greatest challenge that they face outside of physical threats like dinosaurs and Viet Cong and Russians.
So
there is a main antagonist group, but I don't want to spoil too much for people that aren't familiar with the series, because these antagonists are introduced as protagonists.
Gotcha. Yeah, we don't want to give away any of the twists. Arrogant8 says vultures are technically birds of prey, also known as raptors. Yeah, but vultures are also carrion feeders. I think that they walk the line of birds of prey. I'd have to double check, because I know you got accipiters. You got like eagles and then hawks and falcons, and those are the primary offshoots of raptors. Chickens are not raptors, and neither are geese, despite geese being insanely violent and predatory. They are not birds of prey.
So old and new world vultures are included as birds
what about
of
condors?
Prey. Condors.
Yeah, in the raptor family,
I think the key thing is that vultures are carrion feeders, and Vulture Squad is specifically sent to find missing soldiers and POWs.
To find dead people. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of dark humor there.
So if the main antagonists, we really can't talk about those, but the immediate antagonists are kind of the Russians at this secret base where the collider is, and whatever Russian agents sweep into the jungle to do combat with Vulture Squad, and of course the random chaotic act of dinosaurs coming and killing people. What then would you say is the central conflict here? And like there's the literal conflict between the protagonist and the antagonist, and then there's the underlying conflict. How do you define the conflict?
Oh, definitely the conflict to retain your humanity when you're faced with the most primal and savage situations that a person can ever go through, which is exactly how I would define the entire conflict of the Vietnam War.
And if that's the conflict, then what are the stakes?
So in the esoteric sense, the stakes are what you would describe as the souls of the characters,
it's
how
the
much they're
human
willing.
soul.
Yeah. Although there is the threat that experimentation with a particle collider could potentially create a wormhole, such as the one that created the dinosaurs' appearance in Vietnam, as well as the predicament of, potentially creating a black hole, which is a much more immediate and dire pressing threat to the people that uncover the conspiracy of the colliders.
So it's either existential obliteration with the loss of the human soul and descent into nihilism and loss of hope, or it's physical obliteration on a worldwide scale beyond that of the self, because the world gets sucked into a black hole and everything is destroyed. I like it. I mean, like, no matter what level you're talking about it, it's just
you get rid of people.
Ultimate destruction. I think that's good. Like you can wonder about like, the emotional elements or the psychological elements, the physical predicament. It all leads to the same place.
So before Raiden Radio put up Kentucky Fried Dinosaurs,
I would eat that.
And I said, don't tell B Rose because he probably.
Oh no! Don't tell B Rose. Right? Don't tell B Rose about fried dinosaur. He will be getting buckets of that chicken.
And so probably eat it on stream.
In the novel, a lot of emphasis, from what I understand, was placed on the gore. A lot of the sequences of like the hunting and ambushing sequences were very thoroughly described and like exceedingly graphic. What's that going to translate, or how is that going to translate to be portrayed in the comic?
Oh, very viscerally, because unfortunately, me and Bavistu do a lot of research on human anatomy and
that's always good. When you're like, we're talking about carnage. Well, we research anatomy. We want to get it right. We want to be true and authentic when we show like eviscerated, abdomens and separated limbs.
Yeah, and unfortunately, when people die in war, it's not usually clean, like just a shot to the chest, like a Call of Duty game or something. It's much, much, much worse in reality, in all the different ways that the human body can be obliterated.
Yeah.
And that's something that I didn't want to shy away from, because again, this isn't just a story about dinosaurs, it's a story about Vietnam and ultimately what Vietnam presented to the public consciousness, especially when war correspondents were out there and bringing back the evidence of.
Yeah, that's the stuff you learned in school, right?
Yeah.
Let me say hi to Aldous real quick. Aldous is very, very insightful. Definitely, if you like want to have somebody look at stuff and read it and give you their take, Aldous is a great person to go to. We got El Padrino in the chat reminding us all B Rose gay.
Just in case we forgot.
And we have Lord
Crackhead.
Crackhead 33. What's up, my dude? Thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us, because Crack Pack up here in the chat smoking crack day. Bow.
Mo Biggs also said that you are forgetting the optimistic side of
it could create a crack hole leading us to Crack Planet. Yeah, go check in with Colonel Crack. Maybe we could get some more insight into that. So why crowdfunding for this? You did self-publish the novel. Why crowdfund the book? Okay.
I just saw a comment.
Real quick, Raiden Radio wants to know if you're going to be, like true to life and have characters evacuate their bowels when they die. Be breaking new comics.
So it's a little tricky to portray that because it's not always just a bulge in the back of the pants or a stain.
It's a sound effect, bro.
Hard.
Just throw a sound effect in.
Yeah.
I'm terrible.
Unfortunately, that is something else that I've kept in mind, and so when characters die, there can be a mention of the stench of voided bowels.
Yeah, all this I was going to say, I think it comes up in a couple of issues in Nom. Honestly, that's one of the things that got me reading comics early on.
Like, really?
I read G.I. Joe when I was young, but my parents, for some reason, got me the Nom as well. It was like G.I. Joe and the Nom, and I was like 11. So,
that explains
interesting readings.
So much.
And then I knew I wanted to do comics when I read X-Men and stuff from the 90s. And, that was great. But yeah, so why crowdfunding? Why crowdfund this now? You self-published before. What's leading you down the path of Indiegogo?
So when self-publishing a novel, it's incredibly easy these days because you have Amazon, you had CreateSpace when they still existed, you had BookBaby, Lulu, all these different services that exist to allow people to self-publish. But when it comes to comics, it's a matter of time and economics. Uh, it's very expensive to create a comic, and uh, again, me and Babasu tried to get published through, comic publishing companies. We pitched to quite a few, and we heard back from some, but not far enough along to get us an ongoing series. So we want to do this ourselves, but that takes a lot of time. That takes a lot of money, especially with making sure that all of the people collaborating are paid. So we're working on doing this through crowdfunding, also to compensate for the cost of production, because printing 1,000 comics, shipping it out, doing it out of your own pocket is very,
Not
very
cheap.
costly.
Yep,
Yeah,
it is not cheap at all. Everyone here in this chat knows exactly how difficult it can be to take on the endeavor of crowdfunding or just producing a comic book on your own. And that's why going to crowdfunding is so very helpful, because there's a community of creators out here, a whole network of people who are interested in helping you cut down costs, helping you fund your projects, bringing you in to help you advertise. And speaking of advertising, you have a pretty sizable group of people that are following this story on the internet. You have a great website. It's all over Amazon. You got lots of reviews. How have you been marketing this, and how have you been looking for exposure?
So I did this all myself from the very beginning. I collaborated with a lot of different artists over the past few years that I continue to collaborate with to this day. But I've had to do everything, out of pocket, paying for commissioned art, paying for advertising directly through Facebook and Instagram. And all I can do is just keep sharing everything, like those dinosaur groups I mentioned that I saw Babasu on. I've been sharing primitive war related things to like 96 different groups myself for years now. It's the paleo community over the past decade has grown substantially, especially because of the Jurassic World series and a lot of different survival horror indie games and park tycoon games. And dinosaurs are kind of a timeless thing where there's always going to be an audience for it. But it's not something like superheroes where you have uh, millions of people waiting for the next comic that will make as much of an impact as something created by like Alan Moore or Grant Morrison.
Yeah. But despite that, 242 backers is a really good number for the first issue from a first-time comic book creator on a crowdfunding platform. And no offense, I've never heard of you. A lot of people have never heard of you. I don't know if you've been on a lot of live streams or you've been on a whole bunch of podcasts that are related to crowdfunding, but like you popped up on my radar and I was like, look at this book. Peggy was like, I'm #1 backer. And we were like, we got to get him on the show, talk to this guy, because, there's a lot of good in this book. And for that, on that note, why don't we look at the campaign? You've been looking at the
I just
campaign.
brought it up.
Great.
I just brought it up when you said 242 backers.
Who you created the page yourself? You said this is all you doing it yourself, right? So this format, the layout, the tiers, everything's you.
Oh, well, I went back and forth with Babasu on it as well. And we have a friend of mine who's serving as our campaign manager. His name's Jay Wise. And when I was developing the page, I sent it back and forth with them. I sent them screenshots. I got their feedback on it. But pretty much everything written on the main page, I wrote myself. Babasu worked on the graphics and took the pictures of the product, our posters and the comics themselves. But, when it came to like Facebook and Instagram, I've been running those pages for the past 4 or 5 years. And go on.
Did you decide on the pricing for this? Because, $8 is a great price for a 30-page comic. Usually the expectation is that crowdfunded books not exceed 50 cents a page. And floppies are getting harder and harder to do because they don't generally have a high price tag, not the way that graphic novels are, which is why in the comic book sphere, you can take a look at it, and graphic novel sales this year alone are up 68% on the whole. Comics are, floppies are actually down, but getting an $8 price point for a 30-page comic, especially one of this quality, is a rarity, man. Like, why did you decide on this particular pricing?
So we wanted to make it cost effective, but we also wanted to make sure that people had the absolute best product that they could get. Babasu is working with printers in Greece that have made exceptional comics and posters for us, and they'll be handling all of the animal prints packages and all the other add-ons that we have for the campaign. But
speaking of,
we didn't want to keep anybody excluded from being able to access the comic. But we also have to be able to, cover the costs of printing and shipping to, the United States from Greece, the final printed pieces. So we just want everybody to be able to read the comic. And
who are you using for printing?
I said it's in Greece.
A company called Print Fair.
Print Fair, and that's in Greece.
Yeah.
Be interested to see what the rates are like, because how much like looking at different comic book printing companies did you do? Because I'm not sure what the international shipping rates would be from Greece to you. Maybe it's cheaper to print in Greece and pay the import tax if there is any, or the dock tax if there is any, than it is to print domestically in dollars and pay individual shipping going out. But how are you handling like fulfillment? Do you have a fulfillment center? You said you're printing in Greece, shipping the comics, so they go into you and then you're sending them all out. How's that all going to work?
So I'm not the best person to ask about that end of it, because that's mostly been Jay Wise's task load, handling distribution. And we do have a center that we're going to be working out of to ship all these out ourselves. One thing that we wanted to avoid was printing or shipping from Shanghai because of what's going on over there right now and how backlogged they are. I reached out to Print Ninja for a print sample, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but it never arrived.
You're allowed to say it. We talk all about the printers that we've worked in the past. There's Print Ninja, there's Comic Impressions, Comics Wellspring, Ready Comics. There's
Sunfly Printers, who just got us our physical proofs.
You're not supposed to give them the name of our secret weapon.
Oh, sorry.
Although if people asked, we'd tell them. There's also that guy down in Texas. I can't remember his name off the top of my head.
Brenner Printers. George.
We were very close to going.
Yeah, if they could have done spot gloss, we would have gone with them.
And there's Mixum. Also, Mixum's very cheap, so and easy to work with. Not the greatest quality, but if you're not looking for anything like super top tier, like you're not making a prestige version of your comic, then Mixum's nice and cheap, easy to go with. Aldous did say you're printing in Greece, have 37 days left on the campaign, and are going to fulfill by August. I think we should talk to Jay Wise about that, because it looks more like our boy Ethan here is the creative genius behind the comic and its inception. The impetus for making the comic in the first place, because he brings the story to the page. But he's saying campaign will end in May. Even if they rush print, you're back in at 2 days maximum for 1,000 books, print, saddle, and pack up. Usually printers can do a print in a turnaround of 2 weeks. It's the shipping from destination to destination and then the fulfillment, like May, June, July, August. I also know this book is already 100% done, right? Have you haven't sent it to the printer yet, have you?
No, we have. We had samples printed, and I have them now, and they look beautiful. They're the covers are a little bit of a thicker stock than you would normally see with comics. It's I forget the exact paper, but the entire comic looks beautiful, and you can see pictures of it in the campaign as well. Yeah.
So have you done all of like the pre-press checking of the files, sent that in as printer files to the printer, and they're all queued up, ready to go when you pull the trigger?
Yeah, the thing is, we reached our first stretch goal, which will allow us
Add
to
more
add.
pages.
Yeah, and so right now Babasu is illustrating those pages, and we'll hopefully soon be inking them as well. And we also have
one danger. That is one danger with stretch goals that add pages to the book, is potentially throwing off the fulfillment deadline.
Yeah, I know, and that's something that we're going to talk about as well. Jason or Jay will be handling predominantly that conversation.
So when did you put together the tiers and add-ons, and how did you decide what add-ons were going to go with what tiers? Because not everything is available as an add-on with everything else. Like, you can't add the print pack to a print pack. You can't get like both print packs together. And if you order a poster, you can't get multiple other posters added on. Who came up with like the way that the tiers work?
So we wanted to make the survival backpacks, the bundles, a more attractive option for the price point. And also, we wanted to avoid having orphan products. So like the prints by themselves, we wanted everybody that is backing the campaign to be able to actually read the comic. We want that no matter what. But we didn't want to have too many options where it's like, you know, buy the comic with the print pack, buy the comic with the print pack and a poster, buy the comic with the print pack and a poster, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
When are you going to start working on issue 2? Is issue 2 already underway, being drawn? How's that working?
Yeah. Issue 2 is currently being penciled now as well. So we're hoping that after a few months, once we have had everything shipped out and everybody's had time to kind of soak in the first issue of the comic, that we'll be able to move on to, you know, coloring and lettering the second issue and getting it in front of everybody relatively quickly after finishing the first campaign. This is our first time doing a crowdfunded comic project, and it's been quite an undertaking for all of us. And we know that there's a lot more work to be done once the campaign's over and we start shipping everything to everybody. But we're up to the challenge, and we're looking forward to everybody being able to read the comic.
Yeah, that's going to be a fun. Fulfillment's always a fun thing. And if you're using a fulfillment center, you're not going to have to take on the brunt of it yourself. You are going to have to deal with some logistics, getting books to the people that are going to be packaging them up and sending them out in mailers and all of that. But you're not going to be doing it yourself by hand, which that's really the true test of crowdfunding. Can you box up, 300 packages and stamp them all and get the addresses right and all of that? But you're only halfway through the campaign. You've already got 242 backers. So this will probably wind up being a 300 backer campaign, which is really good for your first time out. Do you have any advice for other first time creators in crowdfunding? I mean, you're not a first time writer, but you are a first time comic book creator. And I think this is your first crowdfunding campaign. Do you have any advice for people on that front?
Well, I think once this entire first campaign's over, I'll probably be able to provide better advice. It's still a little early for me to be, telling the old stories of my experiences with the first campaign, All
right. Yeah, I mean, that is definitely fair to say, and you haven't quite gotten over the hurdle yet of fulfilling the campaign, and still only halfway through.
Yeah.
We might get I think the second stretch goal is at 10K, so you might get another tier available, right? That's what the second stretch goal is. At which case you're printing a whole nother thing too.
Yeah, we'll be making available a what we call dossier
preview, right?
comic.
Yeah.
What it is. I already have a book published called The Primitive War Bestiary, which is an art book that depicts the different animal species within the first novel and the first short story anthology. and it's told from the point of view of a character in the story as if he wrote this in his own journal. And so what we're doing is our own take on it, not from the point of view of a character within the story, but from our own perspectives as we, worked on these animals and tried to bring them to life. So what we'll be doing is a 30-page dossier comic where all of the animal prints in the animal prints pack will be utilized as double-page spreads within basically the format of a comic, and along with that we'll have additional information about each species, the real life information that we have of the animals, and the creative liberties that we took in designing the animals.
Very
I
cool.
mean, that's awesome. I would really love to see that become available, but once again, that's another thing that you got to print and fulfill, right?
That's right.
All right.
Sorry.
So, yeah, I think that's probably going to be it for us tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in and hanging out with us and Ethan talking about Primitive War. We backed the campaign. A bunch of y'all in the chat backed the campaign. I would urge everyone else to go check it out. $8 is a really good price for a book, especially one illustrated to this level. The story is nice and tight, I got to say. It was a fun read. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the program.
Yes.
Please click that bell for notifications.
And tune into the frequency.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Thanks for having me.